It's time to do another news of the week on this Wednesday evening, and it's official. Fernando Adi has officially joined the Columbus Crew, and you know how in the last episode I talked about there was a rumor that Fernando Adi was going to go to Columbus, which that rumor eventually came true a couple of days ago. And I also talked about how this was just a classic example of Columbus clearly trolling FC Cincinnati and decided to just get one of their players for much cheaper amount that they of course or FC Cincinnati got when they got Fernando Adi from Portland, and that they are also going to pay much less than what FC Cincinnati did for Fernando Adi. Well, to add insult to injury to FC Cincinnati, it turns out that I actually found out that this deal includes a buyout that FC Cincinnati has to do, and that what that means is that FC Cincinnati has to pay Fernando Adi the remaining contract that they owe him, which was $1.7 million, before they of course can release him and ship him to Columbus, which Columbus only had to pay $200,000 in terms of his contract. And to put it in a more simple term, basically FC Cincinnati just pay Fernando Adi and give it to Columbus. Like I've seen a lot of kind of players that move from their hated rival, and I've seen some very kind of damaging move to the player that of course move from the team that he's currently playing to their most hated rival. But this is probably the most damaging and probably the biggest insult to injury for FC Cincinnati, because not only now they have to hand their striker to their most hated rival, but they literally have to fund him like at least 90% of the fund in order to get rid of him and hand him to Columbus. I mean, yeah, if you're Columbus, you're not only satisfied the fact that Fernando Adi is going to be a good depth piece for you on the attack, and as I said in the last episode, if there's one guy that is going to get Adi back in his scoring form that he had with the Timbers a couple of years ago, it would be Caleb Porter. But it's just that it's hard to believe that you basically just got a striker from your rival, and that your rival had to basically fund all the transfer fee and had to pay out the remaining contract in order to get him. I mean, that is just, Columbus must be really loving this deal in every bit, and that this is probably one of the most impressive deal that Columbus has been pulled off. But at the same time, this has to be one of the saddest deal that FC Cincinnati has to do in order to get rid of a guy that they thought that he was going to do a lot of good things with their club, and then it turns out he only scored one goal last season, and they have to literally pay out the remaining of his contract before they could give to that player to their hated rival, the Columbus Crew. Now, speaking of the Columbus Crew, they are also report to rebrand their team, and I have no problem with the fact that they decided to rebrand their team. Obviously, they are under new ownership right now after Precourt left a couple of years ago, and that they're going to get that downtown stadium built in a couple of years, which, when you have like a new ownership and you are moving into a new stadium, there's going to be a lot of time where teams are either rebranding their name, or in this case, they're not only rebranding their team name, but also changing the color that they are going to be wearing. Now, one thing I will say is that, as long as Columbus, I don't really care what kind of name that they decide to rebrand to, but as long as it's not a generic kind of European name like FC, United, Sporting, Inter, something like that, I'm fine with it, because I feel like as we continue to have more teams come to MLS, and you realize most of the team that has come to MLS have some of the most generic European name to come into the league. Like recently, LAFC, FC is a very generic name, and you see it in a lot of the clubs in MLS. Atlanta United is a very kind of overused name. And then coming into the league, Inter Miami. Like Inter, I remember there is even kind of a dispute by Inter Milan that they actually dispute with Inter Miami in terms of the right to actually use the name Inter as part of their team name. So yeah, I just kind of feel a little bit tired the fact that there's just so many teams that have just. It feels like these teams come to MLS, they're happy that they're in MLS, but they also don't really pay attention and kind of in some way being lazy in terms of coming up what their names is going to be. We're glad to come to MLS, but at the same time, we're just going to name our team like something FC or something United. So, for the sake of Columbus, I hope they will either keep the crew name or change it to something else, but just don't be like Columbus City SC or Columbus United or even Columbus FC, because that's just that's not supposed to. That just kind of keeps the trend in terms of just way too many teams are now currently have like a European generic name part of their team name. Atlanta United is reported to sell Tito Villalba back to Paraguay. Now, when I first saw this, I was kind of surprised the fact that Atlanta decided to now sell Tito Villalba. I mean, Atlanta has just gone through a spring cleaning in this offseason with getting rid of some of their best player, and that does make me a little bit concerned about them coming into this season because, I know they want to get under the salary cap and that, Frank de Boer want to build his own team, but at the same time selling all those players that has proven to be decent and have proven to give you trophies and reaching MLS Cup. That is a huge risk in terms of Atlanta just selling all their asset and bringing some new one. Now, this one originally I was surprised, but then I kind of realized that it makes sense why Atlanta decided to sell Tito Villalba, and the big reason why they decided to do that is he is mostly a super sub kind of player, and that he is getting like $700,000 in order to play that role. And when you are paying somebody $700 to be a super sub, that is way too much of money to trying to pay him for that. Like, unless if Atlanta decided to play Tito Villalba more, or they decided to kind of negotiate and trying to buy down his contract, there is no way in the world that any club should be just paying like $700,000 for a guy that has been kind of sitting on the bench. So it makes sense why Atlanta maybe decided that, we're not going to pay that much amount of money for a guy that clearly should be a starter in any team in this league. Like, any team in this league, I feel like I won't be surprised if Atlanta decided to sell Tito Villalba, which they said that they, of course, are going to sell him back to Paraguay. But I won't be surprised if there's going to be a ton of team in MLS that's going to be calling Atlanta United, and they want to ask if they can get Tito Villalba from them, because again, he clearly is a starter for any other team, and the only reason why he's not a starter at Atlanta United is there's another more decent player that is currently played in his position. FC Cincinnati is looking to get Bobby Wood from Hamburg, and this is kind of interesting in a sense that FC Cincinnati just recently signed a DP striker. I believe it's Kubo. That's the DP striker that they signed from Japan. And what's kind of interesting is that they're looking to try to get another striker, and that, if they're going to get Bobby Wood, most likely it's going to be on a DP contract. And that if you get two striker as your DP, that definitely is not a good idea. But at the same time, it kind of makes sense why FC Cincinnati want to get Bobby Wood. I mean, Bobby Wood, I remember a couple of years ago, he was very talented, and that a lot of people thought that he could be the guy that is going to take over that role that Clint Dempsey is currently playing. Obviously, that didn't work out, and that unfortunately he's now part of a Hamburg team that just recently relegated to the second division of German football, and that he's kind of struggling a little bit in the second division of the Bundesliga. But we've seen before when US player they go to Europe, and that they kind of had a stellar start to their career but kind of started to fall off after a couple of years. We've seen them come to MLS and they do very, very well. So, I won't be surprised if FC Cincinnati might think about getting Bobby Wood, and that maybe he could be very good if he comes back to MLS. But having, as I said before, with FC Cincinnati, they just recently got a striker, and it just does not make any sense if they are going to just get another striker, and especially now they're going to have 2 DP striker heading into this upcoming season. But moving on, Inter Miami. So this episode, in terms of Inter Miami, and talk about who they are linked with, because, you know, every time when I talk about Inter Miami, they usually are rumored with a player. And this time, they actually have 3 players that they've been rumored in the last couple of days. And some of these names are familiar because these names was actually rumored with Inter Miami a couple of weeks ago. But one of the first names that they are looking to try to get is Funes Mori as a DP. Now, this one does kind of make sense because Funes Mori used to play with the current manager of Inter Miami, Diego Alonso. They both used to be at Rayados, so it would make sense the fact that Diego Alonso want to bring some of his player at Rayados to join his new team, and I think that would be a decent signing for Funes Mori to come to MLS, and especially he's one of the most lethal striker in Liga MX. Now, they've been linked with Pedro from Chelsea, which, again, this is one of the names that a couple of months ago they were rumored to get him. It never materialized, and now all of a sudden it just kind of reappear again. And that can set the same with Cavani, who they are actually looking to try to make a last-minute deal in order to get Cavani to come to MLS. They currently, from what I heard, Cavani is getting very close in terms of negotiating a deal to leave PSG to go to Atletico Madrid, but Inter Miami are thinking of hijacking this deal and see if they can get Cavani away from Europe and come to MLS. But, you know, overall, I don't know. Like, when I look at these kind of rumor for Inter Miami, and as the day does go by, and the fact that Inter Miami still hasn't announced that big name kind of player that, you know, Beckham kind of said that he was going to bring, you just wonder, are they eventually going to bring that big name player? And that, are they just, all these kind of talk about them getting the big name player is just a way for them to hype up the fans? But at the same time, you know, as long as if you don't get that big name player, or as long as you don't fulfill those 2 DP as we get closer to the beginning of the season, I just wonder, does Inter Miami is going to look more like FC Cincinnati and Minnesota in their expansion year than they would be with Atlanta and LAFC? Because before these last couple of months, I thought Inter Miami was going to be like LAFC and Atlanta, and that they're going to be very ambitious in terms of getting these young South American players. And then they, of course, will also think about getting a big name. But nowadays, you know, they have got a couple of young, promising South American players, but they still haven't really kind of got that goal score that they really wanted to. And, you know, time is ticking for Inter Miami, especially now. I think we are, today is actually January 29th. So today is actually the day where we are exactly 1 month away from the first game of the season, and yet Inter Miami still hasn't announced that big name kind of player and hasn't filled up their remaining 2 spot in their designated player slot. So that makes me very concerned about how Inter Miami is going to be heading into this upcoming season. And as I said, for a team that I thought they were going to be like Atlanta and LAFC in the beginning of the season, maybe that might not be the case. The Portland Timber is set to announce Jaroslav Nezgoda, I think that's how you pronounce, as their new signing. And this was actually the report literally right after I finished doing the last episode of the news of the week. And what's interesting is that they were saying to announce him as a new DP striker, but it's been 3 days now, and there is still no announcement for the Timbers in terms of finally announcing this Polish striker from Legia Warsaw to join their club. But it seemed like maybe it's going to eventually happen, and it's going to happen in a day. And if it does happen, I think this is definitely a good signing for the Timber, especially they need a guy to replace Brian Fernandez that they lost in the offseason, and this is clearly a signing to replace Brian Fernandez in that striker role. Minnesota has finally secured the signing of Luis Amiola, and all I have to say about this is that thank God that this deal has finally done, and that I also want to say what took so long in terms of getting this signing done. I mean, you know, there was just tons of report of the fact that eventually Luis Amiola is going to be coming to Minnesota, and that I was just kind of waiting days after day and just keep looking at the news whether or not if it's going to happen. And every time when I look, it always says it's going to be close in terms of this deal being done. Well, thankfully it was done yesterday, and I'm very happy the fact that Minnesota has finally start thinking about not only trying to get some signing done, but actually think about improving the attack, which is one of the things that they desperately need to do. Now, I've also heard there is a rumor that they are going to be getting a DP central attacking midfielder, and that they are going to get a player to replace Darwin Quintero in that spot. And this guy, I believe he is Emmanuel Rezo, and that he plays for Boca Junior. You probably remember I talked about him a couple of episodes ago in the news of the week, and I hope that deal would eventually get done, because I really hope that Minnesota can improve what they did last season. I mean, last season it was incredible seeing them making the playoffs for the first time in their franchise history. But now the fact that they, of course, are able to reach that history, I hope they can go into the next step and maybe even go further into the playoffs. NYCFC signed Icelandic defender, and I'm absolutely going to butcher this name, because anytime when you have a player that either come from Poland or if he comes from the Nordics area, I am just going to absolutely butcher their name. So apologies in advance if I butcher this name, but I think it's Gudmunda Forensen. That's how you pronounce his name. I don't know. That's my best attempt in terms of pronouncing this. And the good thing about these names that I don't or I aren't able to pronounce when I first see it is that eventually I'm going to get it right, because eventually when I do watch games and I watch how broadcaster try to pronounce these names, and I basically just kind of copy how the broadcaster pronounced this name, and that's how I eventually will get these names right. But for now, I'm going to just pronounce it Gudmunda Forensen, and I could absolutely butcher this name, but overall in terms of this signing, I think it's a decent signing for NYCFC, and I'm not quite sure if this is a replacement for Ben Sweat in that fullback position. I mean, all they said is that he is a defender, but I'm not quite sure does he play in that center back role or play as a fullback. And if he does play in that center back role, that's good depth for NYCFC in terms of that back four that they had. But moving on, in terms of the next news, is that the Chicago Fire have signed Venezuelan youth international Miguel Navarro. Now, this is a guy that I have heard Fire fans are not happy about, because he has had a lot of experience in MLS, and that they basically just burn an international spot in that fullback position. But it's understandable that you don't want to waste your international spot in areas that you don't see a lot of team waste their international spot on. But at the same time, we'll see if he can be a decent player, and whether or not if the Fire can develop him to be a decent player. And yeah, we'll see if he could actually fit here in MLS. Now, the Vancouver Whitecaps signed Hull City winger David Milinovic, and this is one of those, or actually it's not David Milinovic, it's David Milinkovic, and this is one of those signings that I do kind of agree with some of the fans that they talk about how this is not a good signing for the Vancouver Whitecaps, and especially Hull City fans that I heard that they said that they celebrate the fact that he is no longer a member of Hull City because of how bad he was with the team. And the reason that of course is one of the reasons why I don't like this signing, but there's a second reason why I don't like this, and that is whenever you see MLS team decide to sign players from the championship, or even down in League One, or even in the lower league of the English division, it doesn't usually work out when they come to MLS. But I hope this will not be a trend, and certainly for the Whitecap standpoint, they hope that they might get a guy that all he needs is a bit of a change of scenery so that he can be a decent player. But again, knowing the fact that a lot of English Championship players come to MLS and a lot of them don't usually success, and knowing the fact that this is a guy that his former team basically say he was one of the worst players to play that team, yeah, this is definitely not promising in terms of getting a guy that has kind of pedigree. The Red Bulls, they signed goalkeeper David Janssen from Eredivisie, and I believe it's FC Utrecht that he is going to be coming from to the Red Bulls. And, you know, this is clearly a signing that I think not only adds in more depth in terms of the goalkeeping position for the Red Bulls, but also more competition for the Red Bulls for that goalkeeping role to be able to find the right man to replace Luis Robles. And if you're a goalkeeper for the Red Bulls and you just saw that there's another goalkeeper going to be entering in this goalkeeping competition, you know, that could be kind of demoralizing, because now you have to not only prove that you're the better goalkeeper to the other goalkeeper that is currently occupying that spot, but now there's going to be another guy that you have to prove that you're better than him so that you can get that starting role as the starting goalkeeper for the Red Bulls. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it's going to go, and that we'll see whether or not if he is going to be the guy that's going to be behind the stick for the Red Bulls, and the guy that is going to be replacing Luis Robles in terms of that spot. And if he is going to be the guy that is going to be between the sticks to be replacing Luis Robles in that spot, that is a huge shoot to fill in terms of this situation. The Union is close to complete the deal of center back Jacob Glintze. I believe he actually comes from the Norwegian League, and that he is getting close to joining the Union, and that I think this is a decent deal for the Union, knowing that they add some more depth in terms of that back four. That, you know, this offseason I kind of had questioned whether or not if this back four has enough depth with the way that they have a couple of defenders unfortunately leave the team. But now that they decided to add another center back to booster that depth, I think it's now looking more promising that not only their backline should be just as stable as last season, but now they of course have players that you know, in case if one of their starting center back either is on international duty or if they went down with an injury, you know there's going to be a guy that's going to be quickly step in, and that he's going to have that next man mentality and do very well when he is in that spot. And finally, RSL is in talk with former Italy international Giuseppe Rossi, and this is a name that I think a lot of people probably heard before a couple of years ago, where he was a very promising player for the Italian national team, but unfortunately his career kind of took a downward spiral, and that, you know, in the last couple of years he's been really struggling in terms of form. And it's interesting that now he is thinking about maybe joining RSL, and that, you know, for RSL, I guess they're kind of desperate in terms of trying to get some attacking help, and that's why they decided to get this player, that they hope that maybe he can rediscover that form that he had when he was with the Italian national team. I mean, early on he looked like he could be the next best thing in the Italian national team back in the late 2000s and in the early 2010s, but yeah, as I said, his career kind of went to a downward spiral, but we'll see if he can recover that if he does join with RSL. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. As usual, let me know in the comments below what do you think of these news on the board, and if there's any news that I didn't put here on the board that you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.